Hello and welcome back to the Last Word on Spurs. We hope you're all keeping very, very safe and well. Thank you so much for joining us for yet another opposition view. Yep, we have got to get over Arsenal and move on swift. Tottenham Hotspur back in action tomorrow for the Champions League group stage game against Eintracht Frankfurt. A game which we as fans need a reaction, of course, on the back of a really, really disappointing weekend. And a crucial game for Tottenham in the Champions League. When you think about, obviously, how we've started that group so far, 3 points from the 2 games so far at the moment. Disappointing performance against Sporting and an opportunity now to try and rectify the group to some degree against a really, really tricky side, and one that I'm really, looking forward to getting into with the great Philip King joining us. Phil, won't mind me saying, he actually is a die-hard Spurs fan from childhood, but has since moved out to Germany and has adopted Frankfurt as his second team. So firstly, Phil, how are you? You well?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks, Ricky. Thanks so much for the invitation on here. Big fan of the show. Watch pretty much all of your previews and reviews, and so yeah, I'm good. Really excited for tomorrow, and on the one hand, excited for Spurs, and that hopefully we can kind of forget about the derby, because it's taken a couple of days still to try and digest that one. And on the other hand, I think it's going to be a really, really interesting tactical battle tomorrow night. And it's going to be, I think, a much harder game, actually, for Spurs than probably a lot of our fans actually think. So it's going to be a very interesting game.
Yeah, Joe, in a way, Phil, it's kind of, I think it's great that we've got somebody on that has kind of got the Spurs hat and has also got the Eintracht Frankfurt hat, because then they're like a second team. So you'll be able to feel the pain as a Spurs fan, and then obviously Eintracht Frankfurt, you've got a little bit of a distraction from it. But I suppose, listen, not the result we all wanted at the weekend against Arsenal, and I think the key is how do Spurs bounce back, and how do they kind of regroup themselves for what I'm sure you're going to tell me is going to be a very, very tough away game in the Champions League, probably similar in the aspect of Sporting, where you're going to be going to a venue first off, Phil, that is going to be quite intimidating. And the fans, I would say, will make a lot of noise there for this one, Phil, won't they?
It's going to be a cauldron of noise, like generally tomorrow. I think a lot of our fans, the Spurs fans, arriving and attending the game tomorrow, they're going to be. I doubt that most people will have experienced the louder stadium, to be honest. Because, number one, like Eintracht, they live for European games. Bit similar to Spurs, right? In some respects, the special, kind of glory nights, under the floodlights. It's always been like that for Eintracht as well. And, obviously having won the Europa League last year and having that kind of fairy tale, route to the final, got the whole city mobilized anyways behind the team. But the stadium's even louder for European nights. There's going to be massive choreographed show on before the game. Massive banners. The whole stadium's going to be singing. Not just the hardcore fans. Literally everyone sings in the stadium. So it's going to be intimidating, and I think the Eintracht are going to try and start the game on the front foot. I very much doubt, knowing how. Spurs, how we play under Conte anyways, sitting back a bit and, trying to hit on the break. I expect that's how the game's going to start. The Eintracht are going to kind of pick up the ball and, try and make things happen, which again, having the Spurs hat on kind of disappoints me a bit, because I like to see us play, kind of progressive football, with a ball and try and make things happen. But I think that, Eintracht are going to use the crowd energy and just try and get on our backs, press. They're going to press high. And the interesting thing is that it's almost like two systems probably are going to kind of, collide tomorrow, because, Oliver Glasner, the Austrian Eintracht manager, he loves a back three. So, and Eintracht have been playing with a back three, right? Or a back five, however when you see it. Pretty much since he's come into the club. So I think that it's going to be actually probably two very similar systems coming up together. There is maybe the idea, or maybe the kind of idea mooted, that Glasner might actually change it up with a back four and maybe play 4-3-3, because I know that he's in the past actually countered other teams who play a similar system in terms of 3-4-3 or 3-5-2, or however that system works out, by switching to a back four. But I think that he's going to stay with his kind of tried and trusted back three and try and get Joy over the wings and actually try and get a very quick, get the ball through midfield quickly into the number 10 and beyond. So from a Spurs perspective, I think we need to be strong the first 10, 15, 20 minutes and hopefully get some joy, let's say, again, with the Spurs hat on, getting the ball up to, the front three of us.
I think what's key, obviously, is listen, Phil. You've got the wise hat of both of what's happening in those clubs.
Yeah.
Obviously, for the last one, Spurs viewers and listeners that maybe are not obviously that knowledgeable to how Frankfurt are doing this season, just to give us an idea of how they've started the campaign so far.
I mean, they started the campaign. Actually, they played Bayern Munich the first game of the season. It was the Friday night game under the lights at home. Which was the first time that they paraded, obviously, the Europa League trophy in front of the fans. And suffice to say that it was a slight disappointment. I can't remember actually the exact scoreline, but it was at least 5 or 6-0 to Bayern. So they got demolished by Bayern. It was Mane's first game for Bayern as well. But, since then, they had a bit of a disappointing start to the season in the league, but they've turned it around since. They've gone on a little run now. They beat Wolfsburg away, they beat Stuttgart away, and now they've just beaten Union Berlin at home, who were the kind of surprise package so far this season, who are actually number 1 in the league, right, ahead of Bayern and Dortmund. And it was probably their best performance of the season now on the weekend against Union. To be honest, they blew them away, and it should have been much higher than 2-0. So, Eintracht are in form. Of course, they won the second Champions League game 1-0 away in Marseille, which was also highly deserved. Very good result. There was a lot of fan trouble, of course, as well, right? Which actually resulted in one Eintracht fan being seriously injured by a rocket and has been in hospital for a couple of weeks. And of course, there was all of the rumours about this game maybe being played behind closed doors. So thankfully, it would have been a disaster. But thankfully, UEFA have shown some, let's say, flexibility on that. But, Eintracht are in form. So, they're going to approach this game very confidently. Mario Götze, who signed in the summer, obviously the Golden Goal World Cup winner, who probably they would never have been able to get, someone of his profile if they hadn't won the Europa League last season. Is actually injured for the game tomorrow. So he's going to be missing, which is going to be a blow for Eintracht because he has come in and performed very well. However, the team is pretty much well set into the system that Glasner likes to play. So he's going to be replaced in his role probably by Daichi Kamada, the Japanese international, who actually, I think a couple of years back, he scored twice at the Emirates when Eintracht beat Arsenal, right, in the Europa League. I guess it must have been back then. Yeah, it was, because that's when Eintracht almost beat Chelsea in the semi-final. He will probably come in and replace Götze kind of in the number 10 role, playing just behind the striker. And to be honest, disrupting Kamada is going to be, I would say, one of the main kind of tasks as well for Spurs. If Kamada's on form, and he's not always on form, Kamada, he can be very hit and miss. He can either run the game, he can either, kind of run through on goal easily and score goals, or he's just, literally, he's a dribbling kind of, Eriksson-y kind of player, but he likes to go on a dribble, and if he has a bad game, then Eintracht can struggle, actually. So he's going to be the guy who will try to make things happen creatively, right? So for Spurs, Spurs need to kind of get on his back and press him hard, So whether that's the midfielders, whether that's, Højbjerg and Bentancur, whether that's the strikers, you need to not allow him time on the ball, because he'll start dictating the play. And, I guess from a Spurs perspective, Spurs don't have anyone apart from Kane, maybe, because Kulusevski's also missing, who would maybe play in a similar kind of role, right? We don't really have that kind of number 8 or number 10, whatever it's called. So I think the Eintracht they're gonna try and obviously play very high on the wings with the right and the left wing backs and try and get crosses into the box, but they will also try and mix it up by trying to get the ball quickly through midfield, pass it through the Spurs midfield into Kamada, where Kamada will then turn and either ping a ball, maybe right or left to the wing backs if they're already forward, or try and play a through ball, to the other offensive players in attacking positions. So I think from a Spurs perspective, that's what Spurs need to really do. They need to press higher. They need to press a bit more than they did in the North London derby. They need to disrupt some of those Eintracht players there in that stuff.
It's interesting, Phil. I mean, you keep using that word regards to press, saying that in the last, you'd say 4, 5 weeks, 6, 7 weeks of Spurs, that we haven't really seen that press adopted anywhere near of where it was towards the back end of last season, where Spurs obviously got the necessary results to get into the top 4. I think it's fair to say, you obviously first and foremost being a Spurs fan, it has been a tough start to the season, despite the fact that we're only talking about 1 defeat in the Premier League in general. But I think in terms of a watch on the eye, I think even the most ardent, biggest Conte supporter would say that it hasn't been the most pleasing to watch on the eye. And again, I just wonder, this game has come at a time where Spurs have suffered a defeat to their biggest rivals, London rivals and Arsenal, which would have, I think, maybe set a few alarm bells ringing amongst fans in general. Just that maybe the start we had to some degree has been papered over by surviving and hanging on to that point against West Ham, the point against Chelsea, where again, on arguably another day, if Chelsea had Aubameyang in the squad, would that have been a different game? Of course, he was signed obviously after that game. Do you see Spurs changing massively between Arsenal to Frankfurt? And if so, where can Spurs get at Frankfurt? Where's the areas of success for them that you can see where Frankfurt do have their weakest links?
Well, I regardless of the fact that you could say, oh, it's just Eintracht, right? It's not Arsenal. It's not, a team, on that top level, let's say. I still think that the Spurs midfield gets overrun with the 2 in there, and I would, much prefer from a Spurs perspective that, Conte would change it anyways to like a 3-5-2.
Can I ask you on that, Phil? Because we've had some news. Yeah, Joe, it's interesting. We've had some news coming out today already from obviously Michael Bridge, friend of the show, of course, at Sky Sports, and we understand Michael has been down at the training ground earlier on today, which we know Antonio Conte is going to be holding, or will be holding, of course, his pre-match press conference upon arriving in Frankfurt, which is our understanding here at Last Word on Spurs. Now, early news already coming out. We've seen reports early today that Dejan Kulusevski is expected to miss a minimum of 2 weeks. We're waiting, obviously, for further confirmation on that. There was reports that he would be undertaking an MRI scan, which I did think when we obviously recorded after Arsenal sent shockwaves through us all. So we are waiting confirmation on how long we are going to lose Dejan Kulusevski for. But in addition to that, we know that Yves Bissouma has been suffering from what has been described as muscle fatigue during the international break, which has pretty much restricted Conte from deploying that 3-5-2, which you just alluded to. Do you think without the likes of a Bissouma, Skip is good enough to be able to provide what is needed if Spurs do go for a 5 against Eintracht in the midfield? Or do you think deploying a 5 against them is a dangerous move to make? What do you think from them as the opposition?
I would play Skip, actually. I mean, he's obviously fit, right? I mean, he hasn't played obviously many matches, but
he came on for 20 minutes or so, didn't he, against Arsenal at the end of the game for the derby? Yeah, he came on for some game time.
I'd be tempted to start with Skip, and I'd actually play a 3-5-2. I'd probably, based on him starting, I'd probably have to say then in that case that I'd put Richie on the bench and bring him maybe as an impact sub, and start with Kane and Son, to be honest, and get them playing closer together, right? Because I think sometimes they're too far apart. I would put Kane and Son closer together and just really try and get those wing backs and pushing up. And, to be honest, I mean, I've been calling for Spence to kind of get a chance, but I don't think the Conte is going to put him into the Champions League just like that, So I'm not sure whether even, Doherty would then maybe get a game, but Doherty's anyway better attacking, right, than defending. So I think Spurs will get more joy by playing a three in midfield and getting Kane and Son closer together and try and at least win a bit of that midfield battle, because I just feel that we get dominated, by lesser teams even, Brighton, I think it was Brighton possibly, was it Brighton or even Wolves? I think it was Wolves as well, right? They were just passing through our midfield so easily. And I've got, looking at the Eintracht team, and again, you've got Kamada in there as a number 10, but behind that, they're probably going to start with Djibril Sow, who's a Swiss international. Many people, most people probably won't even have heard of him. But, he's a Swiss international. He's a very, box-to-box, robust tackling guy who actually is probably underrated when it comes to playing the ball forwards as well. And next to him, you're probably going to see Sebastian Rode, who, some fans will probably know. He played a couple of games for Germany. He's actually, Eintracht youth. So he was born just south of Frankfurt near Darmstadt. So he's kind of like he's the captain now of the team. And, he's really the local lad, let's say, in the team at the moment. He's getting on a bit now. He's had a lot of injury problems as well. Of course, he moved to Bayern and then to Dortmund and came back. But, he's an all-action midfielder as well. So, I think that the two kind of holding players, because they are very much holding players, behind Kamada in the Eintracht midfield, they're going to put themselves about a bit and, they can pass it really well. So my fear from a Spurs perspective is that they're going to get a bit overrun. And if they get overrun, then Eintracht will manage to get the ball through to Kamada. And I just kind of worry from a Spurs perspective that, that Eintracht will get a lot of joy from that, But again, looking at it the other way around, if Spurs would play with three in there and get Son and Kane playing closer together and make sure that the wing backs really push up, I think they'll counter that. And, my expectation would be then is that, Spurs will get joy on the break anyways, but probably Spurs, if they get given the ball, they'll be able to have some joy even in, kind of playing, how do you say, like build-up football, let's say, right? Through that. The interesting thing is that Eintracht, looking at the Eintracht team, of course, they've got, a goalkeeper who is probably the informed goalkeeper in Germany, and there's been calls, Kevin Trapp. There's been calls for him, to kind of start for Germany, let's say, in the World Cup, which is going to be tough anyways, right? Because, Germany have still got Ter Stegen, I think, as the number one. But, he should be in the Germany squad. And he had an amazing performance on the weekend as well, right? I mean, he made a couple of, genuine world-class saves. He's had a kind of an error in him as well every now and again, but he's kind of cut that out, right, recently. So, they're up against the informed keeper in the league, to be honest. In the back line, they've got a player, Evan and Dicker, who we were also linked with, right, in the summer as a potential left centre-back option. Maybe, before we got Longley in, and after the Bastoni, will he, won't he, we were linked with Ndicka as that potential left centre-back. And he's a very good player, to be honest. I would have liked Spurs to have gone in for him from a Spurs perspective. But, it's good that Eintracht kept him because, he gives a lot of stability there, but he can also kind of take the ball and, ping passes forward, kind of come forward with the ball as well. He's always good for a header as well, to be honest, for a goal maybe. So, he's a good part of that defence. And, right at the middle of this Eintracht defence, almost as a quarterback sweeper kind of role, is Makoto Hasebe, who is I think he's still even the Japanese captain. He's almost 39 years old now. He's 38, I think, still. But he will be there very much at the back of the Eintracht back line to kind of mop up, kind of play a bit the Dyer role, maybe ping some passes as well. He's not great pace-wise anymore, but he's always in the right spot, so he's always in to kind of coming in with the right challenge. But, he can be exposed from a Spurs perspective, pace-wise. So, Spurs have got that pace. So that's why I think it's just really important from a Spurs perspective that they, try and, don't allow themselves to be passed through in midfield. Because again, And again, I haven't mentioned the Eintracht new striker, right? Who, again, probably most people will never have heard of. But, he's actually a French international now, a guy called Mouani, who signed actually on a free transfer in the summer from Nantes in France, I think. And he's literally just made his debut for France, like in the last international break. And he absolutely destroyed Union Berlin at the weekend. He got an unlucky second booking, so he was sent off actually at the weekend. In some ways kind of similar to our decision maybe with the red card. It was never even a yellow card offence, but he's almost 190 centimeters, 1 meter 90. He's big, he's fast, but he's skillful. And I mean, he's going to be the kind of player that will get sold on, unfortunately from an Eintracht perspective, and in 1 or 2 years probably, because he's just going to get better and better. So he's going to bully the Spurs backline, I think, a bit. And again, if Eintracht get the ball, if they pass through the Spurs midfield, get the ball to Kamada, and he gets it, pushes it through for Mouani, I think that Spurs are going to have some challenges there. So again, it's interesting because it's two systems kind of that are very similar, like with a 3-4-3 or the kind of coming up against one another.
It feels like, Phil, based on what you're saying, it could potentially be a bit of a chess match tomorrow, because again with Tottenham, you do feel, and again, Phil, I have to apologise, constantly looking down at my phone because we are waiting some further team news from Tottenham, which I was going to try and feed into the conversation with Phil now. So that's kind of coming through. So keen to obviously get Phil's thoughts on that. So hence the reason for me looking down, Phil, as that comes in. But like I said, it does feel like it could potentially be a bit of a chess match tomorrow. I mean, Spurs go into that game where really, I'm not saying we can't afford to lose, but based on the fact that we've already given up 3 points to Sporting, I mean, the element is that you win your home games, you should be absolutely fine. But just for morale as well, Phil, you don't want to be losing back-to-back games already when the style of football at the moment on the eye isn't the greatest. And therefore, I'm keen to ask you, I mean, if Spurs get a point tomorrow, is that in your eyes a positive result? On the basis of the group they've got?
Yeah.
And if they obviously have got the home game still to come against, as we know, Sporting at home, Frankfurt at home, is that a positive point in your?
Well, I think and maybe looking at it from Eintracht's perspective again, Eintracht probably have to get something from the game tomorrow, because looking at the group, because Eintracht lost the first game to Sporting 3-0 at home, which by the way, in the first half, Eintracht should have probably been 3-0 up in that game. I was at the match, and they got to the byline, right, with the wing back so many times, and the final ball every time was lacking, right, from Eintracht. But they should have been 2-3 goals up at half time. And in the second half, they got countered, right, and they lost. And that's something that Spurs maybe could also do in the second half, actually, by the way, right? If the game's sort of still in the balance, I would expect Spurs probably to have joy on the break anyways in the second half, maybe. But I think a point, Eintracht need to get something from the game. So Eintracht will be happy with a point from their perspective. They'll think, knowing that kind of Spurs have just lost the derby and are maybe, also a bit wounded. Eintracht will be thinking though, we can win this. I think from a Spurs perspective, it's a difficult one, because you'd probably still have to think, regardless, that Spurs should be going into this game obviously kind of looking to win it, right, and really looking to get Kane and Son, kind of, to get one or, to at least score each, right, or to get a couple of goals on the board. So, probably right now a point for Spurs would probably be would it be a good result? After the North London derby, you're looking at the group, you'd probably have to say a point would be okay from Spurs, because again, I think, it's going to be a cauldron tomorrow. It's going to be very loud. I'm sure are going to be snapping at us.
And I'm sure
I think a point would be
I'm sure you agree,
would be
Phil,
okay. I think for Spurs.
Yeah, I'm sure you agree, Phil. We're not going to be going there and seeing Spurs suddenly transform to playing swashbuckling football at a venue which is going to be very, very difficult to do so. I mean, I guess for you, listen, give us your final thoughts in on it. And like you say, you've given us some real great context. And Phil, I have to say, it's lovely having on. I must say, it's been great having on a Spurs fan. alongside obviously that kind of second hat of Eintracht.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going to get you back on for the reverse fixture 100%, and hopefully just based on how we do over these next two games, hopefully we don't meet them if it's going to be tough in the latter stages. But I mean, final thoughts for you. You honestly, I think you said a point will be a good result. How do you honestly see it working out?
You know, I'm always a bad one at predictions, anyways. To be honest, you know, like whenever I play these kind of prediction games, or like the thing on the BBC, right, with Lawrenson or whatever it is, you know, I'm not the best at actually coming up with the results in the end. So take this with a pinch of salt. But you know, I mean, maybe it's boring to call a draw, but I could see like a 2-2 or something like that tomorrow. I could see it kind of ending up not just a 1-1 or a 0-0. I think there's going to be goals. You know, I think there's going to be goals. I don't think the systems are going to kind of cancel out each other because they're kind of similar. For me, it's going to be one in the midfield, and that's why I'm kind of banging on about that. But you know, I really hope that the Conte, you know, maybe just can get away from his, you know, 3-4-3, whatever it is, and play that 3-5-2. I'd love that, you know, from a Spurs perspective. I think though, if he does that, and this would be my prediction, if Conte plays three in midfield, you know, whether it's Skip or whether it's Basuma, and if he gets the wing backs really pushed forward, right? Because with the extra man, then knowing how flexible Spurs are, right, you can probably push them a bit more forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think if Conte did that, my prediction would actually be a Spurs win. You know, right. I think Spurs would end up winning that game. If we play with the two in midfield, and maybe then my prediction is literally just based on the tactics then, right, how we set up. I would say the chances are actually kind of quite high that Spurs won't win the game. Whether that's then an Eintracht win or whether it's a draw, I don't know. It probably just depends on, again, you know, on the day, right? You know, whether anyone makes any mistakes again, you know, whether there's any kind of cheap goals being given away, the quality of the final ball, right? Is it going to be back again for Spurs tomorrow? Because it certainly wasn't there against Arsenal. And absolutely, to be fair, from an Eintracht perspective, you know, as I said before, in the game against Sporting Lisbon, the final ball, you know, certainly wasn't there either. No. You know, and everyone was going crazy, you know, saying, how can it be? You get into so many good positions and you can't even cross the ball like to a player who's free. So that would be my kind of prediction. If Conte sets up with three in midfield, I would actually predict a Spurs win. You know, whether it's, you know, 2-0, 2-1, 3-1, I don't know. But I would predict a Spurs win. If Spurs don't, then I don't know. I think it would end up being a draw, maybe even a win for Eintracht, because you know, they're going to go into that game and they're going to start it on the front foot. So it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be a really interesting game. You know, just to see how both teams kind of really play the game. You know,
absolutely.
And and there is still a chance. You know, maybe there's still going to be a surprise even from the Eintracht manager. Maybe he will kind of abandon his three at the back and play with a back four, you know, because he did say, I think today he said that he noted, I think in his press conference, he noted that you know, Arsenal obviously play with a back four, let's say, and you know that Spurs have struggled also against teams that play with a back four, you know, so there is still maybe a chance that Glasner could kind of surprise everyone and actually come back with a back four, but let's see. I mean, it's going to be a really hot battle. It's going to be loud. It's going to be energetic. I can't see it being, you know, like a really boring, you know, slow, you know, kind of friendly kind of, you know, procession. Because the thing is, again, you know, for both teams, it's super important, right? You know, Eintracht need to get something from the game. If Eintracht lose tomorrow, then probably it's going to be very tough for Eintracht to have a chance to get out the group. And similarly, you know, if Spurs only get a point tomorrow, you know, or lose, then, well, I don't know, right? I mean, Spurs are going to have, it's going to be very interesting than the rest of the Champions League campaign, isn't it? So
it will do.
Let's see.
Yep.
Let's
Phil,
see.
I have to say it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on Last Word on Spurs. Phil, where can everybody find you on social media, if you don't mind, if you're happy to give out where everyone can find you?
Yeah, of course. I'm on Twitter. I think my handle is Frankfurt Spurs.
Okay.
On Twitter. I'm kind of, growing my Spurs, let's say, presence on there. I've got the same username on YouTube as well. Again, I'm sort of growing my kind of online presence a bit,
Great.
on there as well. And also just a very quick shout out to the South Germany Spurs, if it's okay. I'm actually a member of an official German Spurs supporters club that was actually set up last year, and we got official, Spurs official status as well. So we've got well over 100 people in there now, I think, and the chairperson's a guy called Erland Nordmo, who quite a lot of Spurs fans in the UK will know as well. So we've got a small meetup happening before the game tomorrow, and of course seeing a lot of familiar faces, right, traveling over from London tomorrow. But yeah, it's it's very interesting to see Spurs. My last point would be growing our fan base in Germany as well, because of course historically Spurs have always lagged behind all the rest of the teams, the usual suspects. But to be fair, Spurs have really taken a step forward, I think, in the amount of German Spurs fans there are, right? I mean, there's a lot of German fans that love Spurs, that go home and away, with Spurs as well. So just a quick shout out to all of those, German-based, fans, and also, German fans who have kind of got into Spurs, because we're really growing our fan base, here in the region. So, which is good, right? It's good for everyone.
Absolutely. No, it really, really is. Well, listen, Phil, we're going to keep our fingers crossed. You've given us a lot of knowledge there that we can go away, unpack, and prepare to, either be at the game for, or those that are watching it. Some will be behind the sofa, quite literally, depending on obviously how the team comes out. But honestly, Phil, massive pleasure. Obviously, we'll be tagging you in.
Thanks, Ricky.
And everybody can to find you as well. But Phil, we look forward to you joining us for the reverse fixture, and hopefully it'll be on the back of Spurs securing the 3 points. Thanks so much as always.
Thank you so much, Ricky, and
Pleasure.
Enjoy the game.
Thank you so much. And guys, please, as always, keep safe, keep well. We're back with you for instant reaction to this one on Tuesday evening. So from myself and Phil, take care.